Let's see if we can close some of these windows. Let's see how that works out. And while that's restarting, let's get some of this stuff ready. Is the stream crapping out or what? Come on, laptop. Keep up. Yeah, actually looks like it's doing okay now. All right.
You're still showing Voltron.
Now let's get the stream updated. Okay, that's updated. All right. Now I need to get this thing pulled apart again. And it does kind of look like it's still running like crap. Which is just weird.
It is.
said it was excellent for a few minutes, and then all of a sudden it is crap. Quit downloading porn on all my bandwidth. Wow. Is it at least good porn? That's a good question. Probably. So, hi Germanese. Is that how you pronounce your name? Working on refurbishing an SX-64. Hopefully OBS catches up and starts streaming correctly. Ugh. So yeah, what I've got today is I've got this SX-64 that I picked up a while ago, and actually I believe there were X80, yeah, that was actually right before X86. This was 1983 that this came out, but it's the first portable color computer, portable, 25-pound freaking luggable monster, made by Commodore, color screen and everything on it. It's actually pretty nice. But Commodores have known issues where certain parts fail over time. Some parts were just crap. Yeah, this thing is definitely old. And it's in really good condition. I actually found it while on vacation a couple months ago. Let's see. Oh, yeah. And I gotta get all the screws out of the case to get the top of the clamshell off. And what we're gonna be replacing today is a PLA chip, which is a programmable logic array. Yes, it has a very huge floppy drive, and I'll show you that stuff in just a second. The PLA chips in these they're programmable logic arrays that handle interfacing and controlling and access of different functions in the system. And they are notorious for failure. They get really hot. And this thing, it works for the most part, but some things on it crash. And the PLA is generally one of the most common causes. So I'm gonna get this thing, get those screws out of the case there. Actually, I'll hold this up for the camera as well, or at least get it oriented for the camera. Let's see if you can see that there. It's not like an Arduino chip. It's like a bunch. This isn't even a game that's in the drive. It's actually just a test disk I'm using. It's got some test programs. The programmable logic array chip replaces a bunch of really simple logic chips all in one. So a lot of like the little miscellaneous chips that help organize how the system functions, in addition to like the CPU and the RAM. It controls essentially like when the CPU wants to access RAM versus wants to access video memory. This thing kind of handles that interaction, and if it fails, and sometimes the parts of the system don't get accessed correctly. So yeah, and the system, it is actually pretty neat. The front panel of it actually comes off. It's the front cover / keyboard, and the machine does work. Also on the side here, I've actually built a Raspberry Pi based disk emulator. This actually will plug into the back and allow me to take disk images off of my PC and actually run them directly on the Commodore without having to use an actual floppy drive or floppy disk. But I'm going to get this thing open so I can actually replace that chip. And this big old monster. Full-on 5-inch color CRT in here, along with the speaker. The entire back section is power supply, CPU board here, an I/O board with there's a cartridge slot in here, along with I/O ports on the back. And this long board across the back is actually the disk drive controller. The disk drive controller is its own computer in its own right. And these black and white wires are not normally on the machine. These are an add-on that I put in there to for a custom BIOS, actually, that replaces the built-in BIOS. The custom BIOS actually helps the machine run faster. Well, it helps the CPU and the disk drive communicate faster, so you can get stuff off of disk a lot faster. And this thing's probably in the way of the camera here. I really need to get these cables fixed and get my microphone on. That should probably sound a whole lot clearer. Yeah, and this is a portable Commodore. It's essentially, the motherboard is very similar to the one in the regular all-in-one keyboard Commodores. Things are just rearranged to be able to fit within this. And then there's a keyboard cable that plugs into the keyboard and goes underneath the machine as well. But we're going to be taking out this CPU board, which is also attached to the I/O board here. They're actually held in with some plastic rivets that pop out pretty easily. And make sure to get the whole rivet out and not to lose them. They're really tiny little things. Little plastic pop rivets. Hey, Panzer Pete, how you doing? Good to see you. Are you feeling better yet? You gonna enjoy some vacation time? Well, I actually got a few viewers in here tonight. That's nice. And an auto host by Big Red Pimp. Oh yeah, spring cleaning, fun. Sounds like a blast, and I actually lost half of that rivet in there, but I'll pull that out a little bit later. I'm actually doing a refurbishment on this Commodore SX-64 portable, replacing one of the older chips. Come on, machine. Did my stream just die? What's going on? I don't have a video feed. Where am I going? Come on, OBS, stop crashing. OBS is just being strange. Let me know if you guys can actually still see the stream. I think I'm having issues with my laptop. You have a Z77, the truck? And get some of this stuff disconnected here. Now, where's, of course, my stream looks a little screwed up. Come on, OBS, keep up. Oh, that Z77. i5-3570. Old primary workstation. Oh, okay. Yeah, I think my stream monitor is just freaking out. It's not the most... I have a really cheap laptop that's actually doing the streaming right now because I just don't have room in my office for the... for a workbench to actually stream in front of my PC that's actually got an X99 in it. And there are a lot of connectors to pop off to get to these things. There's the rear floppy drive connectors, the rear expansion port connector, the internal cartridge port connector connects to this as well, the internal floppy drive. And once all of those connectors are free, I can separate the I/O board. It's actually plugged into the CPU board. And then slide this monster out. Oh, and one more connector is actually the power connector as well. Is a little bit buried underneath. Watching your stream makes me glad I'm building a new rig right now. Yeah. My main rig in there in my office is actually easily enough to stream in 4K and then some, but it's not a good space to stream in. Might be good for streaming games, just doing a live stream of like playing Rocket League or Minecraft or World of Warcraft or something. But for actually sitting down at a desk and doing work, it's actually better for me to do it out here, unfortunately, with my laptop. But hey, if anybody wants to donate a nice high-end laptop, even if it's a used one, I will gladly accept it. I am not shy about that. Alright, so I gotta be a little bit careful about this because the firmware upgrade is still plugged in. The plug actually runs to a little switch in the front cubby hole. And you can see here, this is the Commodore main CPU board for the SX-64. There's power over here. I've got RAM chips here, the expansion connector, the 6510 CPU, which is just a modified 6502 that isn't used in everything. Your info is blank for donation. I was actually joking about the donation, but yeah, thanks. I appreciate the thought. These three chips actually are parts of the firmware ROMs. This is a custom Jiffy DOS, which has a switch on it, so you can actually turn off the Jiffy DOS expansion and just use the regular built-in one. And then there's a character ROM, which is all of the characters, the ASCII characters that go on the screen, and another ROM that I forget what's on that one. And in addition to the CPU and the ROM chips, there's a sound chip here, 6581 SID. This is an original 6581. This heat sink is actually covering the video chip, which gets extremely hot, but those don't fail quite as often. And then the little chip we're going to replace is right here, which is the PLA. It kind of glues the whole system together. Yes, Arduino actually hasn't been around that long compared to all the hardware that's in this. The funny thing, the Arduino actually has enough built-in memory and enough built-in horsepower, especially when you run it at 16 megahertz, to actually emulate one of these systems with, if you add on, I think, some external RAM to an Arduino, which you can do that for really cheap as well. We'll emulate an entire system like this, including output to a composite monitor. Like I saw a person do a project like that recently. It's just one little single tiny Arduino, like an Arduino Nano 3.0, emulating an entire system with video output. The Arduinos are a little old, but they're still pretty powerful for what they are, and they're dirt cheap. Dirt cheap is definitely not something to be underestimated. And I am also very ill-equipped at the moment. It looks like I forgot my wonderful tool to pull out the CPUs. So I will be right back. Hang on just a second. And I'm back. I unfortunately have not picked up an actual IC puller, so I'm going to be doing this the shitty way. Z77 can take Z87 CPUs, right? That's a good question. So actually what I'm going to do is just use this little flathead screwdriver to pry this thing up just a tad. And it should pop right out pretty readily. And that's the PLA. Now, I haven't actually gone through every part on the system yet to actually see what's wrong with it, but the PLA is one of the most common. I did some RAM tests with some of the RAM testing software that I found online, and the RAM itself hasn't been failing. So I'm going to take that chip and set that aside. And I got this wonderful package from Finland from a guy that actually makes an FPGA based replacement for the PLA. FPGAs are kind of the newer, much more complicated version of a PLA. A lot more powerful, a lot faster, and they definitely don't generate heat, which is fantastic. Get these open here. And see if I can get that up to the camera. It's a little custom FPGA chip strapped into a little carrier that fits in the dip sockets. And I bought two of them because I have two Commodores, and it's always nice to have a spare. Yeah, it's an SMD to pin adapter. It's just a SMD mounted, just a board with pins in it. And there's a little bit of support circuitry underneath as well. The FPGAs that are on this are actually made by Xilinx. It's pretty common. And there's a little notch and a pin 1 indicator on the end of it, so it just really pops straight in as a replacement. And I will get that seated in the socket, and honestly that is really the installation. The hardest part's going to be actually getting everything back together and start running some test programs and see if this actually helps the crashing that was happening with certain programs. Demos actually were a big thing I was testing and was having severe problems with. And I'm definitely a big demo scene fan. I really like the demos, especially the amazing stuff that people have been able to make the Commodore 64 do. This little 1 megahertz machine cranking out sound and graphics demos that are just mind-numbingly cool. All right. Let's get everything seated back in. Oh, no. The cables, those are actually how they're designed. There is actually a bit of rhyme and reason to the cable placement. But for the most part, this was, 1982 or 1981, 82 that they were designing this, trying to get it out. So a lot of things were taken from the VIC-20 and the Commodore and just kind of sandwiched all together, along with a small but actually pretty decent 5-inch CRT. Let's see, get this in the right place, and start plugging everything back in. Now that the motherboard is seated, I will get the I/O expansion card plugged back into the motherboard. Which actually may be the most difficult part, just to get this thing seated correctly. And that looks okay. Get some of these other cables out of the way. There actually, there is a version. No new boards. No new. There's nothing actually, aside from the chip that I just replaced. Nothing in this machine, and the firmware chip, the firmware upgrade, with these two wires. Nothing else is actually changed in the system. The system is stock for the most part. I don't want to drill into anything. I don't want to actually make any unreversible changes. These wires actually aren't even connected to the Commodore hardware itself. They're just connected to the firmware upgrade chip directly. So if I pop those chips out, the wires are just attached to the chip. This thing can go 100% stock, in a few minutes. So let's get that seated and get this stuff, start plugging this stuff back in. There is a bit of a gap here in the back of the machine, along between the power supply and the controller for the floppy drive. And there is a modification that actually will allow you to squeeze another floppy drive controller in there and add a second floppy drive, where currently there's a little cubby hole that's accessed from the front. It's good for storing like the keyboard cable. But it does, the second drive modification really sucks up a lot of space in here, and you've got to make a modification to keep the cartridge connector in the space that it's in, because the floppy drive is just so huge. So let's get these cables plugged back in. Power cables back in. Get both of the cables for the external. There's actually serial connectors on the back, joystick connectors on the back, and a like an expansion port connector on the back as well. Calls for 3D printed parts. Actually, yes. The 3D printing actually is my other hobby. I don't know if you've actually seen any of my other streams, Germany's, retro computers, 3D printing. I've got Lego on there as well. I do quite a bit of 3D printing, and I was actually going to make an insert, because these wires are attached to a switch that's literally sitting in the cubby hole to switch off and on the custom firmware. And the wires are just run through a slit, because I didn't want to make any actual modifications. But I figured I could actually 3D print an insert that goes into the cubby hole to actually hold the switch, and it could be removable. You like this channel? Good, I'm glad you like this channel. I need more followers. Maybe I can actually monetize it one day. All right, let me get some of these other connectors in here real quick. Get this cartridge connector put back in. Cartridge connector's in. Keyboard connector. Where's this keyboard? Yeah. Yeah, that is the keyboard connector. Get that plugged back in, and this is one of the, what is that connector? Reds. Actually, that's oh, it's the video out connector. This connector goes to a video out that's on the back portion. Yeah, you need a donation setup, and it's empty. And yeah, it is definitely. I definitely need to get a more permanent streaming setup. You know, actually get a theme going, because right now I just have this absolutely basic 3-screen with a little description and a couple of camera. I do have another camera that I can set up for, you know, close-in shots or different perspective shots as well. I just need to rearrange and figure out what I'm going to do. Yeah, everyone definitely has to start somewhere. And I've done moderations for other streamers, and I've done streams actually with other streamers. Panzer was on, who was on here talking just a little while ago. We did a live stream, absolutely shitty Trunksy XY 3D printer build with a bunch of people live. It was actually a long process, and the machine sucks. But it was at least a demonstration of going through the process of building your own machine. And I moderate as well for Jatman, Jatmn on Twitch, and he does an awful lot of streaming, or at least he did last year. He got a job with a 3D printing company this year, and has been very busy. Okay, so let me double check all these connections, make sure everything plugged in correctly. I'm going to pop in a couple more. I'm going to pop in a couple of screws on the back of the power supply to hold it up, because it does weigh quite a bit dangling off the back. And then I'll leave the case open and start doing. I'll power it up and start doing some tests and start running some actual demos and see if anything continues to fail. Hopefully it doesn't. I'd really like this thing to be complete and done. And it's amazing too, when I found this thing, it was in really good condition. Still had the original keyboard cable, which is not common. Those usually get destroyed or lost quite quickly. Even got a custom Commodore logo molded in. All right, let's see. I need to get power. For the Raspberry Pi, actually, that's in this, is just a little custom daughter board that I put together that somebody designed. It's got an OLED and some buttons and some level shifters on it, because the Pi is a 3-volt device, and of course the Commodores are old 5-volt devices. This Pi is a Model 3, 3B. I have this one available because I got a couple of the 3B pluses, the newer ones that are really nice, and this one just needed a project. And this project, it's Pi 1541, and it emulates, and it actually emulates the complete 1541 disk drive on the machine. The 1541 itself that's back here, this is a completely separate computer with its own processor, its own RAM, its own ROM that runs the floppy drive and has a serial interface to the actual Commodore CPU itself. And this thing actually fully emulates that Cycle Perfect. And Cycle Perfect emulation is fantastic because stuff just runs. There are like really cheap SD interfaces that will plug into the serial port on the back that for the most part you can like get content off of a disk image, but they don't operate 100% the same way that an actual emulated drive would. So I need to grab my power cable really quick. Let's see where I put that. And I need a battery pack for the Pi. And I'm back. Yeah, talk to us, Commodore. Absolutely. It's going to talk to us very soon. Actually, you can do speech synthesis with the Commodore. It actually works out really well. Quite a few games actually had sections of speech in them, which for the early 80s was freaking amazing, especially without requiring an additional custom like speech synthesizer board. The SID chip on the inside is actually pretty competent. And I just brought my little Anchor portable power supply to run the Pi, because if I plug things into my laptop will lag out, even if it's just for power. All right, so let me get this squared away here. The handle folds down on the Commodore to actually provide the stand, and the angle is adjustable. You can see on the front of the machine here, the 5-inch color screen, the floppy drive, little cubby hole, and there's actually a little control center here, which has knobs in it to adjust the picture on the CRT, as well as a little reset button for the floppy drive in case the floppy drive freaks out. There is a custom replacement for this, the CRT and these knobs, that actually replaces it with a high-resolution LCD. Uses less power, looks really clear and crisp, but then of course is a modification, and I kind of wanted to keep this stock. If I saw another SX-64 out in the wild for like dirt cheap that maybe didn't work, maybe I would do a full conversion with the LCD. Yeah, this was around at the time of Knight Rider. And I actually did have the same type of car that they used for Knight Rider for kit back when I was out of high school, just going into college. And that car was a piece of crap. It was falling apart all the time. Okay, so I need to get the keyboard plugged in. Since it's a parallel keyboard, it actually has to be plugged in before you power everything on. All the keyboard handling is actually done inside the machine. There's no real logic in the keyboard itself. And sometimes the keyboard acts up a little flaky, but hopefully it'll cooperate today. And we'll get the serial cable plugged in for the external 1541 drive. The Raspberry Pi drive. I was in Germany at the time. I always watched Kid on TV. You were back in Germany when you were really young, like you were born over there. Where are you now? Do you actually live? Now that I live in the States, everyone says it's a crappy car. At the time, they could be fantastic cars or they could be crappy cars depending on the options you got. In the early 80s, there was a gas crunch and gas prices skyrocketed. And a lot of people didn't want to buy V8 machines that guzzled gas. So they actually offered like the 82, 83, 84 Camaros and Firebirds with 4-cylinder engines as an option. And the 82 that I had the 4-cylinder, and that 4-cylinder had no fucking power. Like seriously gutless. Alright, so I'll get this plugged in. This Pi 1541 that I have is just a hand-built one. I actually have PC boards that were custom made and have slots for all the components, and actually have connectors on the board that I'm going to put together and actually send to a few friends once I get some more components. So let's see if I can get this running without freaking out. You see the little red LED come on, and then there's a little drive image that pops up on the screen, and it comes up with a little disk listing. Kind of hard to see there, but if I pull it up to the camera, my cheap cord might cut out. Yeah, Munich to Houston. Oh my gosh. Well, at least you got good food. So, okay, all that stuff is plugged in. Let's go ahead and turn it on. And the CRT takes a little bit to warm up, takes like 10-15 seconds, and it came up. It's really bright for the camera, and so it's actually kind of difficult for the camera to see it. Let's see. What did I do? Oh, did I change that? I think I changed that. I made a change to the floppy drive and the Pi 1541 drive. Yeah, the screen works. Oh my gosh, does the screen work? Let's see if I can get the camera to actually... Oh yeah, it's really bright. The center of the screen is almost white with a light blue border. It says Jiffy DOS version 6, copyright 1989. This Jiffy DOS is the custom DOS. You can actually still buy these custom firmwares, which are, I mean, it's fantastic. They've made them since the 80s. Or, you know, I can flip the switch and turn the machine off, turn the machine back on, and instantly get the original firmware. But I actually have to go on the 1541 drive, which actually, it has a quirk to it where it can be configured where it doesn't automatically load up an image directly from directly on boot. So let's see. We'll see if I can get the Second Reality demo running. Second Reality is really effing awesome. Can you still buy replacement screens for this thing? No, absolutely not. Not an actual CRT. You can. There are kits that will replace it with an LCD, and those kits look fantastic, and they're not super expensive. In fact, they're very similar 5-inch LCDs that you would buy for like an Arduino or a Raspberry Pi. They're I mean, they're everywhere. You can get them from China for like nothing. Okay, so I've got that set up. Let's see if I can get a directory listing. Nope, I'm not getting a response. What did I do? I think I missed a connector somewhere. Maybe I should pay attention. What on earth did I do? I need to double check my work. But hey, that's why we're on stream. I was going to be here all night anyways. Might as well invite some people to watch and drink some tea. And that is a passable tea. Okay, the Pi 1541 looks okay. Let's see about getting this moved around. What's going on? What did I miss?
I'm definitely not seeing anything. So I got the PLA chip in and replaced, and the machine did boot up perfectly fine. Actually displayed the correct thing on the screen, which means that the replacement PLA works. But what am I doing with the floppy drive? Well, it's time to double check my plugs and make sure I plugged everything in correctly. And since all the plugs are kind of tied together, everything's tied down, it's really hard to get plugging it back in incorrect. What are you doing, Commodore? That looks okay, that looks okay. Everything looks fine, what's going on? I'm actually going to throw back in one of the pop rivets to hold the CPU board secure. The board is loose, but it's not actually like touching anything that it shouldn't be. Yeah, and this is a huge pain in the ass. These little rivets. That's why you use needle nose pliers. Here, and they go right in. All right, let's try that again. Get the keyboard plugged back in. I was actually just checking all the connectors, Germany's, just making sure, because the floppy drive actually wasn't responding, which was a little weird. It powers up. The floppy drive on power up does it. It flashes a little LED to let you know that it's actually going through its own little internal startup. Screen comes up, and what happened? What happened with my 50? Oh, yeah, I think the cable that I'm using for my Pi is actually kind of flaky. Let's get the demo disk loaded back up. Oh, I know exactly what's wrong. I'm dumb. That's what I'm doing. There's a no, it's not even a resolder. There's a limitation on the all the floppy drives in a Commodore are connected on a serial bus. They all share the same serial bus. So each drive has to have its own ID number, so that when you access a drive with the load command, you actually give it a drive ID number, and all the drives will hear the traffic, but only the one that matches the ID number will respond. And for testing, I set the ID number of my Pi to the primary drive, and I had unplugged the primary drive. And now that I've actually put everything back together, I plugged the primary drive, the internal drive, back in. So there's two devices that think they're device 8, and they're conflicting, which is why nothing responds correctly. And there's actually an easy solution to that. And that's disconnecting the floppy cable from the internal drive. Yes, and there we go. Now we're actually getting an activity light on the Pi 1541, and it looks like it's reading. and the Commodore says loading ready. I sent it a command, which is load quotation mark $, quotation mark, $8. And that command actually loads a directory from the disk that's attached to drive 8. And then when you load a directory listing, it actually creates a basic program in the machine. So you type list to actually see the directory after you've loaded it. And that looks really cool. That looks good. So I'm going to load that up. And you're actually going to hear, there's a really good audio soundtrack to this demo. This demo is called Second Reality. It's a port of a PC demo that ran on 486 and above PCs from the early 90s, one of the best PC demos ever made. Somebody actually took it and ported all the same type of graphical effects to the Commodore, be it lower resolution and a little bit slower. Yeah, 66 megahertz. Like, I think the slowest machine that I've run that one on successfully is like a 33 megahertz machine. But the Commodore is a 1 megahertz machine, and somebody ported the effects for this demo and squeezed it into 2 floppy disks that are only like 170K each. So hopefully this runs. This is $8, $1. Searching, drive light comes on, which is awesome. It actually emulates the light like it would be on the front of the disk drive. It totally acts the same way. Loading. Are you loading? This one might take a little while to load. 33 megahertz, and you can overclock that sucker. Yeah. Yeah, it looks like it's loading. It's the little OLED screen that's here on the Pi. Oh, excuse me. The little OLED screen on the Pi actually shows which disk you have selected and like what track is currently being accessed on the disk. There's like 30 tracks on these 170K disks that the Commodore has, and it's going through it. It's just going through it really slowly. These demos used up like literally all the memory, all the processing power of the Commodores. This Commodore only has 64K of RAM. There were later Commodore models that had 128K of RAM. Those would be the Commodore 128. And honestly, only, well, depending on how you use the memory that's built in and how you have the PLA configured, you can swap out like 64K plus like another 16K of memory and use that for different things. Yeah, still loading. Oh, and it says it's ready. So I crank the volume up just a little bit so you guys can actually hear. Yeah, I know the shitty laptop that I have has 16 gigs of RAM. My main PC has 32. Yeah, this is so much RAM, 64K. Let's see if this demo runs. Run. And it's going through a loading screen. And it looks like it's running correctly. The demo actually, the funny thing about this demo is it actually simulates the configuration screen from the DOS demo. So like there's an option to choose a different type of sound card, sound quality, and demo looping, which is a joke because if you actually choose any sound card other than what's in the Commodore, this demo drops into a fake DOS prompt, it's hilarious. A screen, like, I don't know if you guys can, if you can read that. It does look like it's kind of good on the stream. I've just got a tiny stream window, so I can't really see if it looks good enough. So I will change that to the SID. The internal sound on the Commodore is called the SID, and start the demo. And it'll take it a minute to start. I just really hope this thing works. Oh yeah, absolutely 8-bit. And here's the part where it usually fails, so I hope it doesn't fail this time. Oh, it looks like it's going to fail. The sound was out of sync. Yep, and there's the failure screen. And it goes white. Oh, that's interesting. It actually went back to a DOS prompt, or the Commodore prompt, Commodore Basic. So previously when I ran this demo, it would actually completely crash and you would have to shut the machine off, turn it back on. But this time it actually looks like it went back to the main screen. So maybe I do have bad RAM, or some other part of the system is bad. That really sucks, because that means I probably haven't fixed it. But it did fail in a slightly less worse way. I'm gonna go ahead and restart the machine anyways. You know, it may be another chip overheating. It may be that the graphics chip itself is overheating. That one does get hot. When the RAM chips fail on this, there's 4 RAM chips, 4 8K RAM chips, and when they fail, they get really hot. Like, you can touch them and they're really hot. Otherwise, they run at a normal temperature. And I haven't felt any of them that are hot. The downside to this SX-64 though is that the RAM chips are not socketed. They're actually soldered into the board, and I would need to buy a nicer desoldering station to actually pull those out. They are not the easiest things to get out. Although if I did actually get those chips out, I would replace them with sockets and then put fresh RAM chips in the sockets so they can be replaced at a later date if they fail. If it is the video chip that is failing, especially when it's being beaten up by something as aggressive as a demo, then it may be that I go on eBay and buy a replacement chip. They're not super expensive. I think I can get one for $15 to $20. Actually, I'm going to load up some other stuff here real quick. Let's see what else I got. Ooh, Edge of Disgrace. There's a demo called Edge of Disgrace that's supposedly really effing cool, and that one just never effing runs at all. So that's loaded up. We'll go look at the directory on the disk. And yeah, it looks okay. So we'll run the load command, which is load open quotation asterisk close quotation comma 8. When you do an asterisk on a load command, it just loads the first file that it finds on the disk. Most games and other things, the first file on the disk was the important file. All the primary stuff would be in there, like a bootloader program or the actual primary program itself. You'll find a lot of Commodore disks. On the label, it will actually read load instructions type load asterisk comma 8 or comma 8 comma 1, depending on what options it needed to load. So we'll get that loaded and see. Run. That was weird. I wonder what it's doing. So the screen went blank and the drive flashed really quick a couple of times. And I don't know if that demo is actually going to load. Well, shit. So yeah, the SX-64 repair saga continues. How many people? I have 5 viewers in here. Holy smokes. Who are my 5 viewers? Besides my wife. We got Apricot, Droop Fruit, Commander Root, Formus Content, Germany's Panzer, and Slow Cool were in here. Hello everybody, say hi if you can. Working on a Commodore SX-64 refurbishment, which is not going quite as nicely as I'd hoped. One of the other options too is that since these machines are so old, this SX-64 being from 1983, 83 is what, 35 years ago? Yeah, 35 years ago. The capacitors in these are 35 years old, and most of them don't last 10 to 20. So it could be that I pick up a capacitor replacement kit, go through and actually desolder the old capacitors and replace them with actual new functional capacitors, you know, stuff that I know is good. Go through and like test the various components. Honestly, it's performing for the most part pretty normal. Let's see if I can load something else. Let's see if one of Fairlight's demos will run. Yeah, you're 35. Yeah, I'm older than that. A little bit. I remember when I was a kid, my friend's dad had a bunch of Commodore 64s and the predecessor to it, the VIC-20. He picked up old VIC-20 machines from people and actually repaired them and put together systems. When I was in junior high school, I actually used... Oh! This one's running. Sinusoidal scrollers. Here be dragons. They are coming down for you. Only the beer so can save you. This is fact. We will survive. Others may not. Lone Commodorians walking the surface of scorched earth. This day in 2018, we loose our minds in the heat of summer. Coding, drinking, repeating. Yeah, this demo was actually done just a month ago. It's brand new. Pretty damn cool. Groups are still doing demos for these things. And that's the end of that demo. So this demo did not run before, and now it does run. It looked great. So it may be that the PLA was failing, and there also may be a RAM problem that I have to dig into. The RAM chips may not, like one of the chips may not be completely failed. Yeah, one of the RAM chips may not be completely failed, but may have like a section in it that's failed. That's just not showing up on any of the tests I've done previously. So awesome, that was cool. Gosh, it makes me want to run more demos. Incidentally, you can actually go, most of these demos for these old systems, they actually record them and put them up on YouTube as well. PC demos, Commodore demos, Atari demos. There's a website called Pouet, P-O-U-E-T, and they're a demo repository. You can actually download the code, download the files, disk images, programs for demos, music from different demo scene magazines, that kind of stuff. And you can actually you can totally see all of that stuff. You don't have to have the old hardware. Almost all the demos on there will have a link that says, like a YouTube link, where somebody ran the program either on an emulator or they ran it on hardware and did video capture. So yeah, you can actually totally see what people are still up to. I think that's pouet.net, P-O-U-E-T.net. So okay, that was cool. So that demo worked. I'm gonna try and load up another one. Where's that damn music disc? Ooh, I wonder if Test Drive will work. Test Drive was a game I used to play. Actually, when I was younger with my friends, and one of the cool things about Test Drive is it was a racing simulator, which, I mean, racing, it was a driving simulator. It was you on the road, and sometimes there'd be a car. But the intro, the game was actually done by Accolade, and the whole intro would like show the Accolade logo, and it would say Accolade presents in this really cool, computer voice. So let's see if that one works. Putting those two up. Loading. And funny thing too, the Jiffy DOS that I purchased, the custom firmware that I purchased for the device, I don't have an image on my emulated drive, so this emulated drive is actually operating as slow as a real drive normally would. Even though the computer itself could totally do the faster mode, I need to actually get an image for that and plop it on this Pi 1541. Okay, loading ready, run. And like before I actually run this, the custom firmware to copy like large sections of a disk, like an entire 170K disk, you could copy it in about 124 seconds, which is, I mean, a minute and a half, or no, 124? Like 2 minutes and change. To actually read everything off of a disk. With the Jiffy DOS, it actually drops that to like 15 seconds. So that like there's a substantial speed difference in this custom firmware. So let's see if this demo runs. This demo actually has a little intro. It was games used to be cracked. They would crack the copy protection so you could copy them onto other floppy disks. And the groups that cracked them would always write their own little intro program that would say, hey, we cracked it, so-and-so, dial our BBS. Yeah, the Commodore can accept it that fast if you've got the custom Jiffy DOS firmware in there. The code that's in it is a much cleaner, faster version of the disk transfer, the serial code. So it actually runs just about as fast as the interface can function. Whereas the built-in, the original firmware was not the most optimal. It was just something they got out really quick and wasn't very good. But it functioned. That was another intro. Okay, so it looks like it is accessing the disk. Oh, it's loading. No kidding. It is actually full. It's kind of hard to see the numbers, but it is going back and forth on the disk. Oh, that's so cool. I hope this runs. Memories. Yeah, I know, memories. Woof. It's funny thinking that, we used to load up these games that would take, 2 or 3 minutes to load. You could actually go get a cup of coffee and come back and then actually play your game, or like, oh. Okay, that sounded horrible. But it played. It's actually running. Ugh, gosh, that sounds kind of horrible. Please flip diskette, then press return. Okay, so I'm going to flip that, which is just selecting a different image on the Pi 1541, and hit return. And it's going to start loading the rest of the game content off of the second side of the disk. And it is loading, so that's cool. I'm happy. It's playing a little bit of music in the background while it's loading, and there's nothing on the screen, so you don't get bored. And it actually came up on the screen. You can see there on, I guess the camera is picking that up. The first car you can choose from, it's actually got stats on it and a little acceleration graph, and it's a Lotus Esprit Turbo, and I think, let's see if I can pick a different one. Oh, this might be a joystick game. Oh. Lamborghini Countach. Oh, and that's back to the Lotus. There it is. Oh, is it doing something? Or did I just turn off the sound? Okay, I might have actually crashed this one. So the new PLA actually is working better, which is kind of surprising. The first disk I put in there didn't actually boot correctly, but all the others have actually been running, which is nice. So in fact, I'm gonna, oops, no, not that disk. Okay, sure. Load them all up. The 1541 drive emulator here that I have on the Raspberry Pi, it doesn't actually boot up Linux. It's direct boot of an ELF file, the actual program that runs it. So it boots up really quick and does one very specific thing, which is provide this emulation layer and this little OLED interface. If I hook the Pi up to a keyboard and a video port, I actually do get a video menu that you can actually select discs from, and that's kind of nice. Or you can use it just as a standalone. I can 3D print a case for that. Oh, we're back to doing this. It's doing a keyboard error that I see every now and then. And that may actually be related to some failed controller chips on the inside. Oh, come on, don't do this to me now. If the keyboard has an issue when you start it up, the first thing it displays at the ready prompt is a 5. It's like, oh great. One thing that is unfortunate with regards to replacement chips on these is that there is no third-party replacement for the video chip that's in there. The video chip itself, it's pretty unique, and there are some people that have tried to make replacement video chips for similar systems, similar 8-bit systems, and it's a lot of work. It is an extreme amount of work. So the video chips were custom chips that had all sorts of circuitry in them that was both digital and analog. And simulating all of that is a humongous pain in the ass. But there are people that are trying. It's a lot easier to replace something like a PLA, because a PLA is just the PLA on the Commodore, for example, has 16 inputs from different parts of the system and 8 outputs. And depending on the inputs, the outputs will change with a specific number, which is something that is really easy to simulate as long as you actually get the inputs and outputs correlated correctly. With the video processor, you have analog video signals that get generated. You have all the analog circuitry on the outside. Most of the video processors, the 8-bit video processors, actually, were CPUs in their own right. They did their own things. It's just you would fill the RAM with whatever video data you needed, and then periodically the video chip would either grab the data directly from RAM or stop the CPU and say, okay, I'm taking over for a second to draw stuff on the screen, and let the CPU go again. There were lots of different ways that they could do that. Still complex, even though it's not quite as fancy as the GPUs we have now. I think NVIDIA's new GTX 2080 has something like 18 billion transistors on it. I don't think Commodore's entire SX-64 product line has 18 billion transistors in it ever total in production. Well, crap. So the keyboard's acting up right now, so that's going to be a little bit of a pain in the ass. I wanted to play some more demos. You'd be surprised at the kind of sound you could get out of the SID chip that's on this thing. It only had 3 voices, very limited range and limited capabilities, but you could do some really cool shit with it. Come on, keyboard. just work? Nope. Okay, well, I'm gonna fiddle with this for just a minute here. And hopefully get that to work again. Gosh, I've been live streaming for an hour and 22 already. That's pretty quick. Okay. Hey, there it goes. So that's good. Keyboard's back. And now my Pi is stopped. Let's see what FOP cycle's like. I think FOP cycle is another demo from the demo party that was held in Europe somewhere in August. So that's loaded. Oh yeah. Okay. So that looks like it's going to work. And we'll load this demo and see what happens. I still have viewers on the stream. Can everybody still hear me okay? Yeah, it looks like I'm still working, but nobody's talking. That's okay. I have enough talk for everybody. Let's see. Okay, loading ready. Run. Oh. Wow. Okay, that did actually run, but briefly, and there were graphical glitches. That may actually be, yeah, the video subsystem, which sucks because that's going to involve a lot of desoldering work and maybe a replacement video chip. But hey, it played this time, somewhat. Well, shit. Let's see if another one will run. Nope. One key on the keyboard stuck down. Gonna have to clean that one out. Well, shit. Okay, so it's loading this demo. Man, graphical glitches. Let's see, do I have, my other Commodore does have the same graphics chip, but I don't know if the one in my regular Commodore is socketed or not, so I don't know if I can pull that one out and swap it into this one to see if it's just the chip. So I know the other Commodore works. I think I ran this demo wrong. It's stuck. Yeah, it's a good thing this this Raspberry Pi program actually boots up like super quick. So is anybody actually on and listening? How's life? What kind of projects are you guys working on? Do you guys do projects? 3D printing, electronics, anything like that? And it does look like it's loading slowly. I really need to get the Jiffy DOS firmware for this. You know me, my projects change according to the next shiny. Yes. Yeah, I hear you, Pete. I'm actually trying to reduce that kind of behavior in my own stuff. I've been actually working on digging through and organizing some of the boxes and projects that I have and trying to list the projects that I want to do so I can get them organized and actually remember which projects that pop into my head. That's a huge process, though. Gosh, I went through the list just 2 days of setting up the list, and it was already like, wow, I have all of these things I want to do. I need to like, I need to cut back a notch. Okay, that demo, looks like it's going to start. That one is running correctly. But this vacation spring cleaning is the catalyst for getting back to my core projects. So printing miniature stuff, painting miniatures, 2 weeks planning, schedule making, BT to get to this point. Yeah. Yeah. I haven't had a lot of free time either. I've actually traveled quite a bit this year and used up all my vacation time, and it's kind of hard to want to start certain projects that are long term when you're gone. Been to Indiana twice, been to Los Angeles once. Just done tons of stuff this year. Did we go to Vegas this year? Yeah, we went to Vegas earlier this year as well. It's I've done a bunch of things, done quite a few things, so it's kind of all blurring together. Oh my gosh, how could I like totally not remember Vegas? So much food. Okay, so that's cool, that worked. All right, what else do we got? What's that demo? Prometheus Unbound. I downloaded a whole bunch of Commodore discs from different places online, just to kind of test things out and play around with it. So a lot of the stuff I haven't ever actually seen before. 2 weeks of planning. Yeah, it's gosh. So many projects. All right. Are you loading? Load faster. It says it's low. Oh, yep, it is loading. Okay, it's just going really slow. It's changing disk sectors really slowly. Most of which is rewriting the same thing, to be honest. Yeah. I'm trying to be better about the actual organization process. Actually started reading the book called Getting Things Done. It's a process for actually managing and getting progress done on your project, so you actually do get things done, and how to actually handle that process kind of a way to organize the things that are going on in your life and in your head. I'm great at schedule planning, lousy at doing. Well, I'm okay at doing. The problem is getting that initial planning. Hey, what should I do today? I get home from work and it's like, wow, okay, I have a million projects and I have 0 energy. So which one takes the least? Oh, looks like this demo is actually starting. That would be fantastic. Oh my gosh. And that's graphical glitches. Yeah, the sound is pretty loud and piercing. It's running, but it has some graphical glitches, so this actually might be a GPU issue. Although it is running much better than it used to. Oh, okay, so... Oh, the memories. That's good. Yeah, I've been listening to chiptunes a long time, and the funny thing is I've got an account on Spotify now, and there are quite a few people that actually are doing older style chiptune music. Either, you know, straight chiptune music or integrating it into, you know, other styles of music. It's kind of neat to hear. Gosh, do I want to dig out my other Commodore and gut it? That may be an option. In fact, you know what? I think I'm going to go pull out my regular Commodore and see if the video processor on it is actually socketed so I can pull it out. Be right back. Alright, and I am back, and this is one of my happy things. This is my C64 in its original box, still in fantastic condition. It's actually pretty darn close to the original color too. It hasn't yellowed quite as bad as quite a few other people's have. And I've actually got some extra goodies in here, connectors that I was using. Yeah, it's actually in there. This Commodore does have one small modification. I soldered in a special video out connector on it. But it's not a permanent mod. It can be pulled right out. There's no modification to the case. There's no damage to it. the original packing material. I have the disk drive for it in its original box as well. And this is just this additional cable that I have coming out of the back. Yeah, and this is definitely, this is one of the original, this is an early C64 model. This, the sticker's coming up a little bit. The adhesive wears off after a while, but it's in fantastic condition. So yeah, what I need to do is actually set this damn thing down really quick. Hang on just a moment. Okay, we'll get the SX turned off for the moment. I'll deal with that shortly, and I'm going to go ahead and pop open this old C64. It does look pretty mint. It is a really good color for the most part. And it's one of the earlier models, but not the earliest. The only downside to this particular C64 is that most of the chips on the board are actually soldered directly in, whereas some of the later ones actually had sockets for the important chips. And there are kits you can buy to actually go ahead and desolder everything and solder in sockets. But of course that requires a good quality desoldering iron that's got a pump on it that, you know, won't make a mess when you're trying to actually pull everything. All right, so we've got 3 screws out, and essentially the top pops right off. There's a connector for the power LED that gets pulled out, and then there's a connector for the keyboard cable that pops right off. Like I was saying earlier, the keyboards on these are dumb. They're just matrix switches that go into an array. And a keyboard handler does all the processing on that. And it's a cardboard shield on top that's actually got foil layered on top of it. And that folds up. And then there's an actual C64 original motherboard. And from this one, you can actually see only one chip that's exposed is socketed. All the rest are soldered in, including like all the RAM chips, all the glue chips. These are the kind that when they fail, they're a pain in the ass. The only chip that's socketed is the audio chip. Underneath this metal shield, which I'm going to pop off to try and figure out, is the graphics processing chip. And hopefully when I pop this off, I will find that that one is socketed. If it's not, well, I'll just have to order a replacement off of eBay. Hopefully it's socketed. Oh my gosh, that's tough. Let's pop the edge. There we go. And the Commodores had these metal shields, at least in the US. Oh, wow. Yeah, the adhesive goop, there's actually a little copper tab that acts as a heat sink that the chip attaches to. But the good news is the chip is actually in a socket, which is great. And it means I can pull it out and actually swap it, try to test. But the thermal adhesive on it is like completely dried out and shot, which is honestly not surprising. So this is going to turn into even more troubleshooting. Let's see. Best tool to pop these out. It's not going to work terribly well. There's not a lot of clearance around this chip, unfortunately. Let's see if we can wiggle it out just a little bit. Nice and easy. I've started down the rabbit hole now. Yeah, I have, Pete. And that chip came right out. And this is it's a pretty stout chip. Commodore bought a company called MOS Technologies that actually made 6502 processors, and they had MOS build a lot of custom chips for them for all their Commodore stuff. 6587R8, revision 8 of the video processor. So let's see. Oh, there is still some smear to the thermal grease, so that might not be so bad. I'm gonna set this aside, and we can swap back over to the SX board and get that pulled out and start that process. So let's see. Pull the power out of the SX here. So what time is it over there where you are, Panzer? Is it like midday or late afternoon? So I have to start getting some of these screws out. And I should probably put my damn microphone back on. I'll get used to this one day. 3:45 p.m. Yeah, you guys are a bit ahead of us. Almost a day. 3/4. Oh, 2:45. Okay, not that far along. And you were, yeah, let's see. There we go. There's one screw. Get this darn thing cleaned up. That should be enough. Okay, now I got to go through again and actually start yanking out all these connectors on this main board to pop it out once more and see if we can get this video processor swapped out. So there's the video output cable, and this is the internal video cable that goes to the monitor. And I gotta separate the I/O board from the motherboard. Oop, and that popped out actually pretty damn easy that time. And beyond that, the only thing I need to pop out is the power cable into the motherboard. Yet again. And of course I'm going to need to pop out all the screws from the power supply on the back. Come on, screws. I think just to get the top clamshell off, you have to take off at least 12 screws, 14 screws. Hey, look, there's the wifey. I said, hi, there's the wifey. She's camera shy. Come on, power cable. All right. Power cable is disconnected and the board gets flipped out. And on this board here, you can see this giant heat sink. That is the video processor. And it's held on with little copper clips. So it'll be, once I actually get this chip out, I'll just pop the clips off, which is really easy, and swap the chip and see if that helps my situation any. Of course, some people would kill me for using a screwdriver to do this, but you got to use what you got. Just little gentle nudges and it pops out. You guys can see there a little close up. It's just a 40-pin dip with a couple of copper clips and this massive aluminum heatsink on it. And okay, what's the orientation? Yep. Orientation noted. And we'll start popping off the clips. And get this sucker off of there. See, there's a little bit, there's quite a bit of thermal paste on there. And it does still seem to have some grease to it. So that's not so bad. Let's see if I can identify which revision this chip is. It is a 6567. Yep, 6567 R8, actually same chip, which is even better. They say if you're going to replace the VIC chip with another VIC chip, try to keep it to the same revision, even though technically they're all interchangeable. So, all right. Oh, yeah, there's pretty damn good adhesion on that one. This might be easier than expected. Okay, so there's the first clip, there's the second clip. Board looks to be in good condition. None of the traces are like degrading or coming up, which is nice for an older board. Some older Commodore boards, if you look at the main board itself, a lot of the copper and the conformal coating on top of the copper will actually start bubbling up, and the traces essentially rot. But this one seems to be like well sealed and everything is still in good condition, which is fantastic. Pretty good build quality on the board. Okay, so this side up. Gosh, I hope this solves the problem, or at least helps. My only other option is to start replacing the RAM around it, which can get to be a pain in the ass. There's color RAM, and I think there's another RAM that's used by the video. Just a tiny amount of RAM, realistically. Come on, chip, get in there. Get in your home. Yeah. It's not seated 100% straight. Come on. Come on up. These old chips and these old sockets, definitely not quite as flexible as they used to be. Wow, and that one won't go in at all. What's going on there? I think some of those pins are stiff. Or I think my brain is stiff. I think it's actually hitting the socket. The clips for the... You just realized it's Friday. Texas is 2 hours ahead. Texas is Central Time, so that means it's 5 minutes away from Friday. Let's get this chip recentered and get these clips perfectly aligned. The clips actually stick out a little bit. So they stick out into the socket, the actual dip socket. So I just need to adjust those to make sure they're centered properly. So this stuff actually goes into the socket like it should. There we go. No more being a dumbass for me. Now it fits in the socket. Most of the way. Get this fully seated. There it goes. Okay, so that's it. The replacement video chip from my known working Commodore, my regular bread box Commodore, has been swapped in. It's the actual same revision of the chip, which is a pretty good coincidence. Didn't really have a chance to inspect the SX-64 when I bought it, because I was actually on vacation in Indiana. Was totally not expecting to run into one randomly in a store. Okay, so we got the power back in. Now I need to plug the I/O board back in. All right. Okay, I/O board is back in. And I will pop in one of these pop rivets, this little plastic pop rivets, just to get it anchored again. And then plug the video cables back in, although they're not, the external one's not necessary at the moment, but the internal one is. And we'll see if the damn thing boots up and doesn't fry. I'm all about not getting fried. All the best finds are when you're on vacation. Yeah, I know. You know, this vacation, it was interesting. We went to Indiana to visit my wife's family, and I came back with, this 25-pound frickin' monster. I actually had to buy a suitcase for this thing so I could take it on the plane with me, because I wasn't going to ship it. It was a whole lot cheaper to just buy a suitcase at a thrift store, throw a bunch of my clothes around it for insulation, and then pay $25 for the plane flight. It would have probably been $60 or $70 to ship it. Okay, so let's get this turned back around. And we hit a bunch of used bookstores, which is kind of a hobby we have, while we were out there, and all sorts of shopping while we were out there. I think I came back with, half a dozen new books. And you know, it was a good trip, all things said. Okay, please don't blow up. Power's on. So much Lady Death. Yes, she got Lady Death. She actually, we found it was 2 Lady Death figurines at a bookstore. One was porcelain, which is like really a porcelain figurine of a comic book anti-hero. That's pretty cool. I'm gonna see if I can get that other demo going again. I think this was one of the demos that crashed. It was Fop Cycle. Oh my God, Lady Death. That was the last comic. Yeah, and you know, there is actually more Lady Death. Polito separated from his publisher and is totally doing his own thing now. Or it might have been Death, the High Cost of Living. I get confused. Gosh, when did Lady Death come out? Dark Beth is my wife, Panzer. She's actually hanging out on my stream. Okay, demo loading. Let's see if this demo runs. Come on. Oh, that sucks. It failed in a slightly different manner in the same spot on this one demo. So it is not the video processing chip, which means it is very likely one of the RAM chips, which I am not looking forward to having to replace. Hey, Automation Jason, how you doing? I'm continuing work on my SX-64 refurbishment. Replaced a chip in it with a custom PLA replacement, trying to get it to work. And this actually helped. It fails slightly less now, although I think I'm actually having issues with RAM that I would need to replace. Ran some demos on it and did some music. Some things worked out okay. Let's see if I can get another demo going. I really want to see Second Reality run correctly and not crash. Dropped out of comics when the covers became more important than the story of your art. Yeah. My wife has an awful lot of Buffy the Vampire Slayer comics. Extreme collections. They are like beautiful hardbound collections of comics. Okay, so, alright, restarted it. I'm going to load up this demo and see if it crashes in the same place or if it crashes slightly differently. I just swapped out the actual video chip from this Commodore SX-64 with one that I had that I know works in my other original Commodore. So if this demo doesn't work or it crashes in a different way, it's very likely RAM or some of the other miscellaneous chips on the board. Yeah, like the Lady Death lingerie series, the Lady Death swimsuit editions, all the Lady Death. It is eye candy, absolutely eye candy. But it's eye candy on the inside of the comic as well as on the outside of the comic. Loading up Second Reality. Okay, come on, load faster. I believe you were on one of my previous streams, Jason, watching me either put together like this emulated. Oh no, I'm not refurbishing to sell. I'm refurbishing just for my own. Like I want it to work. I want it to be something that I have. But I built a Raspberry Pi based floppy drive emulator. Just to be able to get disk images from my PC in through the machine. I did that on another stream, and I did some more stuff on a previous stream. I think you were in on one of those. But the backstory on this SX-64 is I found it on vacation a couple months ago in Indiana. And I'd always wanted one. Actually, I was going to get one at one point, probably back in the early 2000s, but that the person who had it didn't want to give it up. All right, I'll run this demo. And of course, now that I found this one, it was actually in a store. It was dirt cheap. I talked them down like $100 less than they wanted. And it's just nice to be able to, woo. Interesting, the color's different. It's not bad. Interesting. I may actually have a RAM problem. Either the color RAM or the secondary RAM that the video has. It's got a little teeny tiny bit. Alternate foil covers were the last straw. I've seen an awful lot of comics. Like I actually have some comics now that have like 5 different covers for every single issue, and it's kind of ridiculous. And some of the artwork on the covers is nice, but it's not like, oh look, I'm going to spend 4 times as much for the same content. It's got to be Murder on the Completionists. Yes, it does. And you know what? It's their own fucking fault for buying into it. You know, they'll only keep selling what people keep buying. Oh, and that failed as well. That failed in the exact same manner. So I know it's not the video chip. That's quite unfortunate. And it resets. So at least it's behaving better. I replaced the PLA programmable logic array chip, and the machine does function better. Swapped out the video chip, performs exactly the same. Oh, shit. I need to look at the documentation. There's actually a guy who maintains a document on repairing the SX-64 and common problems. Unfortunately, there's not a description for my problem particularly. Forfignugan. RAM chips. I/O, CPU, I/O board, PLA. I just replaced the PLA. There is a CD4066 chip on the board. That can cause distortions, it says. Yeah, the downside to replacing like the color RAM or this 4066 chip or even the main system RAM is that none of those are socketed. I'm going to have to desolder all that crap. And if I'm going to replace those, I might as well go ahead and order a replacement capacitor set. So none of the capacitors look bad, but they are old as shit. And some of them may have dry failed. Now that I think about it, I should probably also do some voltage tests on the power supply, because the power supplies are known to be faulty on these early SX-64 models too. I can hear them. Yeah, I finished the book recently. It took me 9 months. Yeah. I'm trying to be less completionist now. I need to get a deck for this computer build. How's my refurbish going? My refurbish is actually progressing. It's failing in a slightly better way. But I'm still getting failures. I swapped out the video chip Germany's and from my known good working Commodore, and it fails in the exact same way as the other one. So I know that the video chip on there is fine. And I'll probably need to desolder some chips around the board and do some other tests on it. That would be a long project. I'll need to order parts for that. So much work. So little reward so far. Gosh, it's already 10 o'clock, after 10 o'clock. I've been streaming for a couple hours. It's nice that I actually had some people hang out with me. It's good to see you guys again. Start making episodes. Yeah, I need to. I got a ways to go before I can monetize. If I look at my affiliate, or is it partner? No, affiliate. The easier one to get on Twitch. I've done all the basic streaming requirements as far as time goes, as far as frequency of streaming goes, but I would need to hit 50 followers, and I think I have like 18. And honestly, there's not a whole lot of people interested in the stuff that I do, or there's not a whole lot of people that actually know. I did post it to Twitter, and I do have quite a few people that follow me on Twitter, but not a whole lot actually show up for the streams. Maybe you can send us parts. If I could get people to send me like computer parts, classic gaming, retro stuff, that would be fantastic. There's a guy on YouTube, the 8-bit guy. He gets stuff donated to him that's just like absolutely amazing. Some of these old hardware that people just have, lying around in their attic or their basement or wherever. And he gets so much amazing hardware donated. But he also has a really professionally done stream. He's a musician, so he did his own theme song. He does really, really well with the graphics editing. I'd like to think I'd get there at some point, but I'm still new to this. I definitely need to get a better streaming machine, get a style set up, get some stuff going to where I have my own style, my own kind of interesting content that doesn't look like I'm just some Joe who doesn't know how to set up his screen and make it look nice, because it looks like crap at the moment with a couple of cameras and that stupid text. But it is informative enough that it actually functions. You can see me, you can see what I'm working on, you can see my cup of tea. I also did Legos the other day. Let's see if I can get a picture of that. It's a Lego Ninjago set off to the left there. And yeah, it's 10 o'clock. It's definitely bedtime for the wife. She gets up early and works earlier than I do. I have a lot of Legos though. Like I have a kind of a we have a Lego obsession. We have just about every Lego big modular set. I did a live stream build of the Lego Voltron that was just released, which is it's pretty cool. It actually is a full-on transforming lion robot. That was a pretty cool build on stream. That might actually still be in my video on demand. Might still be available for that. Wow. So yeah, geez. I have some work to do. I got to do some research, and I have a paycheck coming up next week, so I might be able to drop some money on a decent desoldering station. One that actually has an integrated pump on it that functions well enough that I can pop these chips off without damaging the board or making a mess, and replace everything on the board with sockets so that, you know, if things do fail, they can be easily replaced. But that would definitely be for another night. Gosh, I need to clean up this mess and probably get some sleep here myself real soon. You need to get together with the aerospace guys here in Houston. They love these old rigs also. Aerospace. Do you have a link to those? You can go ahead and put a link in the chat. It's unrestricted at the moment because not enough people know me that I have trolls. If you can link to those guys, that would be awesome. I'll take a look at them sometime. So yeah, and like, you know, I have another project here where like the cubby hole that's in the front here on the C64 or on the SX-64, I was going to like design and 3D print a little insert that sits on the right hand side, just enough to hold the switch. And you can kind of see here that there's just a simple toggle switch that toggles on and off the custom firmware. And I can actually, I'd be able to put that on a panel mount with something that I could just insert and maybe lock down with some zip ties on top on these grill holes. That way I'm not doing, excuse me. That way I'm not doing permanent case modifications and drilling and breaking things. I really like to keep things as undamaged as possible. Gosh, let's see what else. You know, honestly, I think that's it for the night. You guys have any like Commodore questions or questions about other projects, or do you guys have any other projects you want to share? Anything you guys want to talk about? Let's see if I can get one of these music discs going. And it looks like that thing is still crashed. I got email or Facebook. I do have an email. I'll go ahead and message that to you that you can send info to. Let's see if I can get this stream thing to actually come on. Twitch, let me message. There, I sent you my my email address. You can actually send any links and stuff, any of the relevant stuff there. And Jason says, just working on a way to make cheap, strong metal parts with 3D prints. Yeah, that's a field that a lot of people are really trying to figure out. One thing, like I know the Spectratech people have been doing, they do lost wax casting, lost plastic casting, whatever they call that, where they take their large format printers and they print out these massive pieces, and they use those pieces to build molds, and they pour the metal into those molds, and then the metal melts the plastic right out of the bottom of it. But you get like titanium parts. Like, they're actually making really good money on that. Investment casting, yes. Investment casting. Yeah, they are single-use prints, but it does pay off for things like, what they're doing, like titanium pumps, just massive, huge, expensive metal parts that would otherwise be extremely difficult or even more expensive to produce. Honestly, the plastic is cheap, in comparison. Yeah, that's there's a lot involved in that, and there's not a lot of consumer options for like SLS printing. I think we have a few options available that are in the $10,000 range now, but of course those printers are tiny. You can't print large parts in them. Let's see if this demo will run. Some markets merit melting 8-hour prints. Yes, some markets absolutely do merit melting those prints. And those prints, I mean, they're printing way more than 8 hours over at Spectratech. Some of that stuff is like multiple days, because they're printing like seriously massive, I think their printers are like 600 or 800 millimeter or even larger printers. And they've got multiple printers running all the time. Just they do like some large scale work for doing it out of their house, or it looks like it's out of their house. Ooh, is this demo gonna run? Hey, it's accessing the disk. This demo is running, but it's running poorly. The speed is varying, and the stuff that's on the screen is not quite right. Oh, it sounds horrible. Oh, you know what? I wonder. I just had an idea. The chip that I haven't replaced in this thing that is replaceable actually is the SID chip, the sound chip. Are all my crystals good? That's a really good question. I don't have a frequency counter high enough to check all of the crystals in this one. I think I can only do like up to 5 megahertz or so. And I know some of the crystals in these are definitely higher than that. Although, I do have some options for things that I can do. But one of the things I was just thinking about is the audio chip that's in it has more than just audio hardware in it. It has some other extra hardware in it as well. And that audio chip may actually be not running correctly, and that may be causing some slowdowns. And I do actually have a replacement third-party chip, which get the tape off of it here. There are groups of people that have made replacement audio chips, replacement SID chips for the Commodore, to varying degrees of success. And this one that I'd purchased from a team that has a Facebook page, actually, this chip is exceptional as far as simulation quality. Audio is not isolated. The audio handles a lot of little different things, and it's got stuff in it. It's got things like the joystick ports, they're on the joystick ports. They're ports for buttons, which are just on-off ports, and there are also ports for variable resistors, potentiometers, so that you can have like actual variable joysticks or paddles, and those actually go through the sound chip, which is weird. But when you think about it on a low level, it kind of makes sense because the audio hardware already has analog hardware in it. It has the DAC, obviously the digital analog converter, in that chip, as well as an analog to digital converter to read analog signals, and they use that for like paddles and stuff on the joystick port. And there are some other issues as well. The SwinSID Ultimate chip that I bought actually can simulate different revisions. Yes, they have op amps. Audio hardware like that has been around quite a long time. Definitely older than this machine. Synthesizers and such have been around, I think, effectively since the late 50s, early 60s. Although, you know, people didn't really start using synthesizers heavily until the late 70s, early 80s. You started seeing more of the synth stuff come out because computers actually got a lot cheaper. You could actually have a full-on computer with MIDI interfaces. There are MIDI cards for the Commodore that actually, I mean, you can sync them up with MIDI devices. You can control MIDI devices. You can use a keyboard externally, an external MIDI keyboard, to actually, you know, play audio directly on the Commodore. A lot of the early 80s synths, the keyboards themselves are just 8-bit computers with little sample banks in them and FM chips, like the early Yamaha OPL chips. And there is actually an FM chip cartridge for the Commodore as well, that few people ever used. There's a video, the 8-bit guy actually has one of those FM chip cartridges for the Commodore along with the keyboard, the MIDI keyboard, and he plays it, and it sounds fantastic coming out of the Commodore. I just started messing with op amps since last year. Yeah, op amps are really old parts. They've been around for a long time. All right, let's see if I can get this. The SID chip is actually pretty close to the top of the board, so I might not need to pull the board out to replace the SID chip, which would be fan-fucking-tastic. I'm just gonna pop the power out real quick. Better to be paranoid than to have things energized. Okay. So on the card here, just like the first chip right here on this side is the SID chip. And I believe I can pop it out. Let's see. I'm gonna get my head in the way with the camera here. Please don't mind my fat head. Let's see if I can pop this without... Yeah, it looks like I can pop it out. That's good. One thing I did notice too after I replaced the PLA chip, which, I mean, the system started running a little bit better after I replaced the PLA chip, even though it's not perfect. I played the Test Drive 2 game, and it has the intro where it has the digitized speech that says Accolade Presents, and it had a pop in the background with a really funny hiss on it that didn't happen originally on the original Commodore I used to play it on. So you know, there may actually be something wrong with the SID chip as well. We'll find out. Trying to be real gentle with this chip because I don't want to scratch the board or break anything. You can get replacement motherboards for these, and I can do motherboard repair, but I'd prefer not to. And there we go. There's the chip, and that's the MOS 6581 original SID chip. It's got a date code on it of week 35 from 1983. It's not super old. Oh, let's see. Okay, so I've got this replacement, and by default the replacement chip should actually automatically boot up in 6581 mode, but there's a utility disk that comes with it that you can load up, and you can actually talk to this chip and tell it to act like a different style SID chip, like a later model SID chip sounds slightly different, just for variations in the hardware. None of the analog components were super consistent, so some Commodores sound slightly different than others. It's not a huge difference, but in some instances it's noticeable. Huh, and that went right in. And let me take a look. I'm then just taking a look at the board. Oh, okay. Cool. Get the old flashlight, camera flashlight out. That went in and out faster than I expected it to. Any fans in there? No, actually there are no fans at all in this system. Surprisingly enough, it does generate quite a bit of heat, but back then there weren't really many systems that had integrated fans. On the back of the Commodore here, the back section, the entire back plate is a giant metal, like a cast heat sink, like the entire thing. It's structural, and it holds also the power supply. And then that acts as the heat sink for the power supply, so it doesn't need active cooling, it's just passive. My sorry self waiting for copper heat sinks. Hope they arrive tomorrow. I just realized there aren't any fans. No, there aren't any fans at all. There's nothing like that. And the CRT does get pretty warm. The power supply gets pretty warm. Of course, the video processing chip gets warm. Aside from that, nothing else really gets that warm. The processors don't get that warm. Okay, so I got the new audio chip in. Let's see if that makes an impact. I do really want to hear that chip. I originally bought it for my to modify my original Commodore, but I never got around to that project. Ended up moving to a different state. Okay, power up. Woo! It binged on startup. That's cool. All right, let's see. Let's get a demo with some music. Load asterisk, comma 8. Loading. That's cool. I've had this chip for a while. I wanted to hear it in something. Gosh, what was the first computer I remember having a fan on? I believe it was my 386. The first 386 that I had did not require a fan or a heatsink, but later model did. And then everything from there on in required a heatsink and fan. And I remember one of the machines I had at school that had a 286 and it didn't have a fan on it at all. And it just barely got warm to the touch. Okay. Let's see if this demo starts up and runs okay. Ooh. There are actually LEDs on this audio chip that correspond to the different audio channels. And that's actually kind of cool because it's lighting up inside. I don't know if the camera's catching that. Nope, it did not affect this demo. This demo is still running like crap. But hey, at least there's a cool SID chip in there. I don't know if the camera can catch my finger way over here. There are actually some LEDs lighting up. Yeah, it looks like the camera's catching it. There's a red, green, and a yellow LED that are pulsing with the music, which is really cool. I do remember that one of the 8086 clones that my friend's father had did require a fan, or at least it required a decent sized heatsink, and it was just a DIP 40 chip. But it was the 8086 at the time was like a 4 megahertz chip, and this clone was like a 20 megahertz version. It was an NEC V20 or V30, which was the 8086 clone. And those did get really hot, but they ran a whole lot faster than the original Intel chips. All right, well, that is really cool. I'm gonna have to take a picture of that. Still got my flashlight on. Let's take a picture. Boom. Looking good. Disco in the House, the AMDs, or that other company that those had fans. There was AMD, there was Cyrix, there were like 3 or 4 other chip companies that started up and failed within, you know, 5 5 years. Ducking out. Good to see you, do. All right. Good to see you, Jason. Thanks for stopping by. Have a good evening. Yeah, there were a lot of those companies. Cyrix, I think Cyrix got absorbed by somebody else. AMD got really lucky in the fact that they actually started putting out really good products at a low price point. Funny thing too, like everybody's been always like, Intel's so awesome, Intel always is better than AMD, and in the last year AMD's sales have actually outpaced Intel's substantially for like the first time. Not that they have the best chips, or I mean, honestly, I really do like AMD's chips. The laptop I'm streaming on right now actually has an AMD A10 APU. It's the integrated 4-core CPU plus 6-core GPU. And it works pretty good when Windows isn't sucking CPU. My main streaming rig is just an Intel i7 with a buttload of RAM. My first Pentium class CPU was a Cyrix PR133 Plus. Oh gosh, I remember those. And then he moved to a K62 350. Yeah, Panzer. I actually had a pretty similar progression, but I had an AMD 486 DX4 120. So it was 120 megahertz 486, which was the fastest 486 you could get. And I remember that machine could play. It could play an MP3 at a pretty high quality, but you couldn't play more than one or do a bunch of other stuff while it was playing. And then after that DX4 120, I had, let's see, I had a Pentium 166 that I picked up from someone used. And then I moved up to a K62 400, and then I bought a K62 500 that I overclocked pretty substantially. The K62 500, gosh, I need to pull out pictures of that. That was my first custom case. I actually took the computer case and did a full-on custom paint job all the way around, metallic, and I even did a K62 logo, the actual AMD logo on the side of the case in metallic paints. It looked really cool at the time. That case ended up getting destroyed by FedEx one time during shipping. And after the K62, I moved on to an Opteron. I didn't get a regular Athlon. I got an Opteron 165, which was the first dual core that was generally available. And that Opteron lasted me for quite a while. It was a really good processor. And after the Opteron, let's see, what else did I get after the Opteron? After the Opteron, I actually upgraded to a Phenom 2 4-core, Phenom 2 820 4-core. And that Phenom 2 that I have actually is sitting in my server, my backup server that I use for file sharing. That's my old machine. And now I've got the i7. Yeah, I did stick with AMD for a while. AMD was inexpensive. The price for performance ratio was pretty darn good. Intel had the overall top end performance, but they didn't really have a leg in the low cost market. And AMD now has some server chips that are pretty darn good. My last employer, 2 employers ago, I actually built quite a few new servers, and they all had 24 core AMD Opteron chips, and they were phenomenal. They had so much power, and they were very cheap in comparison to the Intel builds. Ryzen builds are cheaper than i7. Yeah, it depends on which Ryzen and which i7. The i7 I have is the 5820K, which is the 6 core that's only like $250. It's probably even cheaper now. And the 6 core 5820 is just, I mean, I don't ever peak out the CPU on anything. The only time my system is lagged is when I'm trying to run 4K gaming on my monitor. And I only have a 1080, and so 4K gaming is not always the best depending on the game. Intel are great for dedicated PCs. I use separate gaming versus workstation for people like me, not a pro-level gamer. Ryzen is the perfect balance of performance and price. Plus, I hate the additional Intel tax on price and cooling. Yes. And for cooling too, I've really decided that I'm sticking with Corsair's water cooling kits. I had one on my Phenom. I have one now on my i7, and they're fantastic. They don't leak, they just run, they're inexpensive, and none of my CPUs under load even get over like 55C. AIOs are my go-to default now. Yep. That's I have the Corsair H80, which is the all-in-one with the double thick radiator, but it's a single 120 fan radiator. It's just double thick and has a push-pull fan on it, so it sticks out a little bit. But it fits inside, like almost all cases, in the regular exhaust fan slot. Versus some of the larger double-size radiators, triple-size radiators. Oh, gosh. Let's see, what else is going on? Yeah, it looks like my viewer count went down a little bit. Yep, okay, wife logged off, Jason logged off. Still got Panzer and German on there. I wonder if it's counting me in one of those. Matt Mong Gaming. Matt? Really? Matt Mong? That's my cousin's name. Wonder if my cousin actually did stop by. That would be interesting. That would be pretty damn interesting. Okay, so I've been on for 2 hours and 45. I'm getting damn tired. I appreciate you guys hanging out, but I'm definitely going to stop with the stream for now. I got to figure out what I'm going to do if I need to button up the SX-64 and put it back on the shelf for a few days while I order some replacement parts. So much to do, so little time. Well, thank you for hanging out. Have a good night, Germanys. Have a good afternoon, Panzer. And yeah, I'll try to stream some more and catch up with you guys on another stream. No worries. I'll keep an eye out on Twitter. Always happy to drop by. Yeah, thanks. It's actually good to hear you back on Twitter, Panzer. Hadn't heard you on there for a while, and you tweeted today, and Twitter's like, "Hey, Panzer tweeted again for the first time in a while." It's like, yes, cool. Good to see you. Night, guys.